Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Addictions 101 briefing. My name is Nathaniel Smith. I'm one of the local health promotion specialists here at CFB Borden. So with regards to all of our online programs, we've been asked to provide a few different points. And you can see them here. The first is to identify that the material that you're about to witness and watch is property of the Department of National Defense. We can't control who is at the other end of this webinar, but we can identify that some of our material is not necessarily appropriate for children. So we ask for parental discretion with regards to that issue. And finally, this session will be recorded and available to be viewed by anyone a little bit later on. We have also been asked to be able to provide these specific resources during this time. So you can see a few resources here that can be used by primarily everyone for different reasons. So before we get started, I thought I'd quickly go over a little bit of what is available to you through your health promotion team. So here you can see a list of our programs that we offer. Again, these programs are available across the country, both in French and in English. So we offer two programs under nutritional wellness, an injury prevention program, two programs in our addiction cell, our Butt-Out program, and our alcohol, other drugs, gambling, and gaming. So your presentation today that you're about to watch is from that particular cell. And finally, under our social wellness cell, we offer 5 different programs: a stress management course, an anger management course, a course on communication called Intercom, a course for mental fitness and suicide awareness, and finally, our newest program, Respecting the Calf. So for more information on any one of those programs, feel free to contact us here at Borden Health Promotion or your local health promotion team from your base and or wing. So today we have 3 different objectives for our Addictions 101 briefing. The first is to discuss the details and impact of addiction on our society/environment. The second is to help you identify and be able to help someone that perhaps may be in need. And finally, we want to make sure that you're familiar and know of the available resources that somebody could benefit from. So let's start off by looking at a few different definitions here and some examples. So the first definition we'll look at is gambling. So gambling is defined as risking something of value when there is an element of chance associated with the outcome. You can see a few examples listed here as well: lotteries, bingo, 50-50 draws, stock market, any casino type games, are all examples of how people will gamble. Second term here is internet addiction, and this is defined as any online related compulsive behavior which interferes with normal living. Examples of that can fall into this category would be video games, internet use, or use of social media such as Facebook, Instagram, etc. And finally, you can see drugs. So drugs is defined as anything administered to the body other than food that produces a change. Examples include such things as prescriptions, drugs, over-the-counter medication, illicit drugs, etc. When we think of drugs, we tend to really think about psychoactive drugs. And these are substances that are used to alter our mood, perception, and or consciousness. And they tend to fall under 3 different categories. So let's go over those quickly. The first category are depressants, and these slow the brain down. Examples of depressants are alcohol, heroin, and opioids. Stimulants, on the other hand, speed up the brain. And examples of stimulants include such things as caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, and methamphetamines. And finally, hallucinogens. These more or less confuse your brain. Examples include cannabis, LSD, and magic mushrooms. So with regards to any of these, which has the biggest impact on our society, on our in the CAF? If you've thought about it, it's alcohol, right? The most widely used drug. And we'll get to some stats a little bit later. Let's talk about causes of substance use problems. So researchers, doctors have all tried to identify reasons for substance use problems. And it's been very hard to distinguish exactly what causes this to happen. They have identified 3 different realms that impact and influence these issues. The first is genetic. So again, in this category, more or less, some individuals can be at a higher risk if, again, they're predisposed to issues around addiction and mental health concerns. So again, if they're born with certain genetics, that will increase the risk of them having issues around mental health issues and addiction. Next one, let's talk about environment. So again, what's been identified here is that environment plays a big role in influencing our choices, and which leads into the next category. But again, culture. So if we are in an environment that encourages certain behaviors, accepts certain behaviors, more than likely, more of those behaviors are going to take place, and more problems will be associated with those behaviors. Environments that also have high levels of stress are also associated with higher issues around substance use and addiction problems. Last but not least is the personal realm. So here you can look at a few different things. Personality traits, low self-esteem, people that place high demands on themselves will have more issues around substance use. And last but not least in this category, and maybe the biggest influencer here, would be people's personal choices on how they choose to cope with the stress in their lives. So some individuals will choose negative coping mechanisms, which will then, of course, increase stress and increase that behavior, and can lead to more issues around substance use and addiction. So again, that's a little bit on trying to identify causes of substance use problems. There is no specific equation, but again, these 3 elements will influence more issues and potentially addiction problems. Here's a list of the more or less biggest impacts in the workplace that addiction can have. The first is health and safety. So again, there is increased rates of accidents in environments, in workplaces where there is problems with substance use. Performance is of course going to be impacted, and going to lead to a few different issues as well. Absenteeism benefits increase dramatically when there's issues of substance use and addiction. Liability is fairly interesting. So again, with regards to liability, any organization is responsible for providing a safe workplace, and that includes the individuals in it. So if somebody is under the influence of whatever substance and is not creating that safe environment, organizations can be held liable. Organizations and supervisors are also liable for the health and well-being of employees. So again, it's law that one must try to help their employees with any issues. Public image and staff morale. So of course, within the CAF environment, it is never John Doe or Jane Doe that is in the news with regards to any of these issues. It is CAF, Canadian Forces member, in the news. So again, public image can be impacted with regards to issues around this. And finally, staff morale. You can leave that could be linked to all of these really. But again, if there's issues, chances are staff morale is impacted, and is not only impacting those directly, but the entire unit, the entire base, the entire CAF. So 2 questions. Is there even a need to be concerned? And what has the CAF done to respond to these issues? So let's quickly talk about these. First, looking at some stats. So these stats are from the Health and Lifestyle Information Survey, probably from 13-14. So again, that's a survey issued every so often looking at health trends in the Canadian Armed Forces. So from the latest survey, you can see that 94% of CAF members have reported to drink alcohol. 44% have reported drinking more than 2 standard drinks on any given day. Just under 6% of CAF members have reported to be using illicit drugs. Again, that's within the last 12 months. And finally, there's a high use of prescription and over-the-counter medications in the CAF. So perhaps you're surprised, not surprised by these, but let's compare them to civilian stats. So again, Canadian civilian stats. So for the first one, 80% of Canadians report to consuming alcohol. So you can see in the CAF a little bit higher. The next stat is double in the CAF. So about 19% of Canadians identify drinking more than 2 standard drinks. So again, in the CAF, more than double. Canadian stats with regards to illicit drug use. So again, roughly about 12% of Canadians identify using illicit drugs on a regular basis. Again, in comparison to the CAF stats, again, you're looking at about half. Again, is there some influence there? With my discussions with any other groups, tends to be yes, with a zero tolerance in the CAF with regards to illicit drug use. Again, people don't feel they can honestly answer that question. And the last stat on there with regards to high use of prescription and over-the-counter medications, again, with 2 reasons for that, it tends to lead to the first being the demands placed on CAF members might be higher than most physically demanding occupations, etc. And the second aspect is with regards to kind of your benefits and coverage. So again, if you can get a prescription over-the-counter medications free of charge at the MIR, and chances are you're more likely to use those than others that have to pay for it. So again, that might be 2 of the reasons why it's a little bit higher there. So that's a little bit on stats. So what has the CAF done? So the CAF has, of course, put different things in place to help offset issues around substance use and addiction. The first is and they have developed clear and comprehensive policies that communicates expectations, consequences, and the assistance available. We won't get into too much detail on policies today. I'll go over a few, but again, you can find all that information on your own. Next one is to train officers, supervisors on how to implement the policy. I'll get into that detail in a second. Educate anyone and everybody available on the issues. And again, that's what we're doing here today. And finally, have services and programs available to assist members. And of course, that is through health services. So again, we provide the majority of the education piece around this. With regards to supervisors and officers training, we do offer a 1.5-day program for supervisors to be able to deal with issues of addiction at the unit level. It's called our Alcohol, Other Drugs, Gambling, and Gaming for Supervisors. And we also, again, of course, offer unit briefings, typically upon request, to educate everybody on the different issues around addiction and substance use. Health services, as I mentioned before, is, of course, your go-to for treatment and one-on-one help. So what you're looking at here is, again, a few of the major policies in this area. DOAD 1519-3 is your CF drug control program. DOAD 19-7 is your alcohol misconduct. And of course, most recently is your cannabis policy, acceptable use of cannabis in the CAF. There are several other policies that apply in these different areas. Of course, you've got private debt policy, and your acceptable use of internet and computer use. So again, you can look into those for more information on in-depth knowledge around the policies. Let's talk about now, let's switch the focus a little bit and talk more or less on why people choose to use or perform these behaviors. So that's exactly my question for you. I'll give you a second to kind of contemplate and think about that. So why do people use alcohol, other drugs, and or choose to gamble or game? So you can see a few answers here. To feel better, to be happy, or to feel nothing at all. To forget, to be accepted, to sleep better, to be social, to cope. You could have come up with a whole bunch of different answers on your own as well. I also like to ask at this particular time with groups, which one of these answers, which one of these are going to lead someone to having potential problems around substance use and or addiction? And the answer to that, depending how you look at it, could be a trick question, but which one of these can lead to someone having issues around substance use and or addiction. It tends to come down to frequency and amount and intensity with regards to that. And that brings us to our next slide here on the continuum of addiction. And as you can see, it's identified right there. With increase in use, increases in problems occur along with it. So let's go through the continuum and talk about each stage. So the first is the experimental. So this is more or less when somebody will try something for the first time or for the first time in a long time. If they like it or they're fine with it, maybe have no preference, they may move on to the next stage of vocational. If they don't like the behavior, the use, again, chances are it's going to end there. Occasional, this stage here is more or less when somebody will choose to participate in that behavior on occasion, just as it's identified. Might be at certain unit functions, might be when they only get together with certain individuals, but doesn't happen on the regular basis or too often. I also want you to pay attention to the colors. So again, here, if you can't see it very well, this is supposed to be green. And the next stage is regular use. And again, you can see it's yellow. With regards to regular use, in the right environment, or perhaps the wrong environment, depending on how you look at it, occasional use can easily become regular use. So perhaps you're posted, you're on course, you're on training, and you run into a few individuals that like to perform that behavior. Next thing you know, you are participating in that behavior more often than you used to. Regular use can be, again, frequency of course increases, but it can be every weekend, every TGIT, every day after hockey game, etc. So again, it becomes a regular behavior here and regular pattern. Here, consequences are still fairly minor. In occasional and experimental, very little consequences to that use, to that behavior. But in regular use, again, consequences increase slightly. You might spend more money on certain occasions, might wake up with a hangover, etc. But again, that's regular use. Misuse, the next stage in orange, it starts to occur when use starts to interfere with normal functions. And what does that mean? This is when you start to see more impacts in more areas of your life. Performance might be impacted at work. Trouble with the law or with your supervisors, etc. Impacts on relationships. Perhaps now a little bit more financial problems. So again, misuse occurs when you start to interfere with regular life. Dependency, again, the last stage of the continuum in red, again, it's supposed to be red, might look a little pink there, but in red, occurs when somebody loses the ability to control that use. They will continue to use regardless of the consequences that they are experiencing. So again, that's a little bit on the continuum. Now let's relate the continuum to your mental health continuum model. Chances are you're more familiar with this model than the last, but it flows perfectly with that, along with those colors. So again, in the green, you've got experimenting and occasional use. In the yellow, you've got your regular, again, but here still controlled. Misuse occurs in the orange, and dependency more or less in the red. So again, problems increase with use as you're going down the continuum. So that's a little bit on the continuum of addiction and how it can be viewed using the mental health continuum model. So barriers to treatment. So if someone does find themselves experiencing problems, why will they not perhaps seek help? Why are there barriers to treatment? Here are the major or the most often occurring barriers to treatment. The first one on here, denial. So at times, who was the last one to really know that there is an issue, right? It tends to be that individual with the issue. Others around will see it first. So again, denial. May not even recognize that there's a problem. Perhaps they do not know what to do, where to go, who to ask, right? So again, not knowing what to do. Fear of consequences. So again, somebody may fear the consequences of coming forward. Of course, a real barrier there. Stigma, probably one of the biggest barriers, right? Nobody wants to be judged. Nobody wants to be labeled. So again, stigma are the negative attitudes, behaviors, and thoughts that we tend to associate with different issues. And the last one on there, enabling of others. So we'll talk about enabling shortly. That's something that we can all not do. But again, if we are not conscious of that, we may think we're helping somebody, but really we are simply enabling them to continue on with regards to that behavior. So enabling more or less prevents somebody from experiencing the consequences of their behavior. So why would someone change if they can more or less get away with it? So these are some of the barriers to treatment. Now, with regards to barriers, those are more or less why somebody wouldn't get help. So how does somebody actually get help? How does the case get discovered? 3 ways. Of course, first one, somebody comes forward. Maybe they recognize where they're at, know what to do, eliminates that stigma and comes forward, asks for help. So that's the first one, voluntary. Behavior and or job performance. So this is where friends, co-workers, supervisors will more or less witness and view changes and identify that there's potentially a problem there. So again, they see it. And the last one more or less relates to something happening. So there's an incident, there's an accident, there's a charge, and it gets brought out that way. So again, 3 different ways that quite often issues around addiction comes out. Voluntary, by being observed by somebody else recognizes that there's an issue, that there's something going on, and tries to help, and or there's an incident that occurs and it gets brought out that way. So let's look at and talk about what you can do, what anybody can do to help somebody that may be dealing with issues around substance use or addiction issues. The first is to be able to recognize those signs. Second is to not enable. So don't let them continue on with that behavior. And we'll talk about all these here shortly. Know the resources and encourage others to seek those resources. So again, we are not encouraging you to solve problems, but be able to identify that something's going on and that there are resources, professionals available to help with those. So let's talk about some different signs. So again, what would be some different signs that may indicate to you that somebody is dealing with issues around substance use or addiction? Here are a few examples. So again, you can look at changes, physical changes in individuals, emotional, behavioral. So again, with regards to physical, these are just a few. Emotional, exact same thing. Behavioral. So depending on the behavior, depending on the issue, you may see some specific signs. Again, regardless of what it is, chances are it costs quite a bit of money to participate in that behavior. So again, look around at issues around financials. Look at the changes in behaviors, and that really brings us to the mental health continuum model, mental fitness continuum model. So recognize changes in behaviors throughout the model. Key thing with the model, again, I'm sure you've all seen it, heard it, is to not wait. We don't want to wait until somebody's further down the continuum. We want to recognize changes early, intervene early. A lot of these different changes, reactions may not even be addiction related. However, again, with the changes probably means that something's going on with the individual to cause those. Addiction just might be one of them. So that's a little bit on what to recognize. So recognize changes, recognize increase use, increase participation in certain behaviors. Recognize that people will more than likely be thinking and talking more about their interests. If their interests are around alcohol, it'll be around alcohol. If it's around gambling, it'll be around gambling. We'll just wait for the phone to stop here.
Hi, you've reached the Smith. Sorry, Mitch, you can leave a message. I'll give you a call back.
All right, so back to it. So enabling. Enabling is the next one. Enabling is more or less when through our ideas, our attitudes, our behaviors, we allow somebody to continue on that behavior, whether it's alcohol, drug use, gambling, gaming, whatever it is, we allow that behavior to continue. And it's more or less by preventing that person from experiencing the consequences of their behavior. So if we look the other way, if we perform some of their duties, we are allowing them to continue on that behavior because, again, there are no consequences. So why would I want to change if I can continue to show up to work too hungover and I go sleep it off in the back room, right? So that's enabling. We may think we're helping, but again, we are simply allowing that behavior to continue. And chances are where you see the overlap of this of these changes, there are more things happening probably at home in their personal life that you don't even see. So chances are if it's kind of overflowed into the work area, into your friendship, chances are it is much worse at home. So enabling can help or can occur at, of course, different levels. So here you can see it can happen at the level of the individual. So again, somebody will self-enable. That is more or less allowing that behavior to continue for themselves. People do that by denying, by minimizing, by deflecting. It can happen at the level, at the coworker level. So this might be different things as covering up, performing some of the duties, trying to hide it from supervisors, etc. At the supervisory level, enabling can more or less happen by not dealing with it, by looking the other way, thinking that it's okay or perhaps normal for this to be occurring. At the organizational level, enabling can happen by perhaps not having policies, by not enforcing the policy that's in place. by not supporting the supervisors trying to deal with those issues. So again, those are examples of how enabling can take place kind of throughout the organization. Key thing with enabling is to recognize when it is happening and to know that you may think it is helping, but it is actually increasing the issues, the problems. Chances are someone is not going to recognize that the change is required or needed because they're not experiencing the consequences. So with regards to resources, here you can see a few different resources. So again, of course, health services. With regards to addiction counselor, do you have to go through your chain of command? Do you have to go through your MO to make it to the addiction counselor? No. If somebody is concerned about their use around addiction, they can again call and make an appointment directly with the addiction counselor. Again, that'll be through health services, but again, not necessarily through 3-4 different entities or people. CIF-MAP, so your Canadian Forces Member Assistance Program, 1-800 number that is available for CAF members, their family, and also EAP, the same number for civil servants. But again, it is a referral service where they will find you an outside organization to help with whatever issue. If we're talking about addiction, they will find you counseling outside of health services. So that's your members assistance program. Your chain of command is, of course, there to help and support. Many other resources also. EAP is your employee assistance program for civil servants. D&D employees also have their own. Local addiction agencies, and again, many different resources. What I like to identify for resources with everybody is to know of a few who can access them and when. So again, many resources out there. So that's a little bit on being able to recognize the signs, to not enable, to know of the resources available, and to encourage people to hopefully seek those resources. We're going to switch the focus a little bit now and talk about some harm reduction approaches. So harm reduction is an approach to reduce the impact of certain behaviors. And harm reduction can take place pretty much with anything. In health promotion and for the CAF, we focus on harm reduction approaches for alcohol use, gambling, gaming, and now cannabis use. We do not necessarily promote harm reduction approaches for other drug use, illicit drug use, of course, because there's zero tolerance in the CAF for them. But again, harm reduction is an approach to minimize the adverse effects of participating in that behavior. We're going to focus a little bit on the harm reduction approach using the low-risk drinking guidelines for alcohol use. Why? Again, it's the most widely used drug in the CAF. 94% have identified consuming alcohol. So these are your low-risk drinking guidelines. You can see your numbers here. So for women, it is 0 to 2 per day with a maximum of 10 per week. For men, 0 to 3 per day at a maximum of 15 per week. I very much like to emphasize that these are not objectives. These are not goals. These are simply numbers that if you choose to consume alcohol, these are keeping you at your lowest risk. Not no risk. No risk would be not to consume any at all. But again, if you're choosing to consume alcohol, following these guidelines will reduce your risk of adverse effects, so impacts on your health and different things like that. Typically get asked, okay, so I can save my 10 for TGIT, right? Or my 15 for Friday night. The answer there is, of course, no. You're getting into binge drinking at that particular time, and of course, increasing risks with that and different risks as well. And that's why the 0 to 2 per day is there with a maximum per week. So you can see by doing the math, there are a few days that people are encouraged to consume none for for those breaks. So you might now think, okay, so what is a standard drink, right? These guys here only had one, but obviously there is quite a bit of alcohol being consumed in those huge glasses. So what is a standard drink? So a standard drink for wine is identified at 5 ounces at 12%. So again, a 5-ounce glass of wine. If you think about probably the wine glasses at your home, if you haven't measured those, or what you order at a restaurant, again, typically is not 5 ounces. We tend to upsize our wine at any restaurant, and of course, it'll be above your 5 ounces. For liquor, 1.5 ounce at 40%. So again, 1.5 ounces. And for beer and or coolers at 5% is 12 ounces. So why these particular numbers? Again, each one will be equivalent to 13.6 grams of alcohol. So again, that is a standard drink, or what's been identified as a standard drink. Should you be consuming products that have higher percentages of alcohol and still being the same size, again, you're looking at consuming something that is higher than one standard drink. So with regards to these low-risk drinking guidelines, or any harm reduction approach for that matter, for other issues around gambling, gaming, etc., of course, these guidelines should not apply necessarily to everyone. Some individuals should be looking at abstaining from that behavior altogether. So again, here with regards to alcohol use, these individuals that fall into this category should aim to consume 0 drinks per day. And these can be identified as individuals with health problems or who are taking certain medications, people who need to be alert, people with a history of substance use and or issues around addiction, women who are pregnant and or breastfeeding, and people who will be operating a vehicle. You can put heavy equipment on there, etc. So there are probably a few other items that can fall under this category as well. But bottom line here is that these guidelines don't necessarily apply to everyone. And again, with low-risk drinking guidelines, it is not no-risk drinking guidelines. They simply reduce the adverse effects of, in this case, consuming alcohol. So the exact same thing can happen for gaming, for gambling, for cannabis use. Again, by taking certain measures, you can reduce the risk of adverse effects happening in any one of those behaviors. So today, what we've talked about, again, we looked at the potential impact that addiction can have on our society, on our environment. We talked about how anybody can help. So know the different signs, recognize those changes. Don't enable, right? So again, don't allow that behavior to continue. And finally, know of the resources and encourage people to seek those available resources. For a refresher on those resources, again, here are a few of them here, right? You've got your health services, your addiction counselors. You've got us here, but again, we would refer to the same entities. Your Canadian Forces Members Assistance Program, local addiction agencies, your padres, your chaplains, all part of the resources available. So again, in our addiction cell, we offer 2 programs, Bud Out, as our tobacco reduction program, and our alcohol, other drugs, gambling, and gaming course for supervisors. So again, if looking for more information on any of those, please feel free to contact us and or your local health promotion teams. Once again, these are the resources available to you, specifically a lot of them available across the country and for different reasons. And again, I'll leave them up here as I'm wrapping up. So I hope, again, you took a few different key points, key messages from this brief. For more information, contact your local health promotion team for more training and or education for you and or your unit. Thanks. Have a great day.